Welcome to the Earth's Edge podcast. I'm your host, James McManus. At Earth's Edge, we run guided expeditions with a focus on environmental and cultural sustainability. We created this podcast to share stories from people who have found the outdoors and fallen in love with adventure. Each month, we're giving away one of our summit jackets worth €150. To be in the running, all you need to do is subscribe to our mailing list at earths-edge.com/podcast. There's a link in the show notes. Now, for today's guest.
There is times when they'll tell you, go as fast as you can before the point of running. And there is points on the icefall, at 6,000 meters, where you're moving as fast as you can, absolutely gasping out of breath.
That was John Burke, who summited Mount Everest back in 2017. I wanted to get him on the podcast because he didn't climb his first mountain until he was 28, and 10 years later, he was standing on top of the world. John tells me about all the mountains he climbed to prepare for Mount Everest, and he also shares stories from the expedition itself. I started out asking him about growing up in West Clare, and he tells me that, like myself, he was absolutely useless at field sports growing up. I really hope you guys enjoy this one.
Yeah, so I'm from Spanish Point here, where I'm speaking to you from today. A long way away from big mountains here. The only mountains are waves on the sea, but I actually never surfed or never went near them. Yeah, look, I'm passionate about West Clare. I live in, I work here. I'm living in Ennis now, but I'm passionate about where I'm from. I'm in the tourism and hospitality business, and I'm always flying that flag. So great to get the opportunity to fly it here as well. Born and reared in Spanish Point. My family. My dad bought a pub 54 years ago this weekend, and my mother joined him soon afterwards. And yeah, that's where I was reared, overhead a pub in Spanish Point. It was great. Loved it.
And come here, were you into much adventures growing up, or were you more GA background, or what?
I was very unsporty, full stop, to be honest. Like, my whole family dynamic was all very focused on work. Like, my dad was unbelievable hard worker. My mother was too. They started with a very small pub here in Spanish Point, which is, outside the village and outside the catchment area for a pub. And all my upbringing, it was very much, everything was around work. And I enjoyed that. My hobby was work, and my downtime was work, and family time was around work. And we lived and were reared overhead the pub. And my dad had no interest whatsoever in sport. Like, it was the furthest thing from his mind. In fact, it was nearly the opposite. When you'd have local lads applying for jobs behind the bar, and, they come in with great pride saying they're the captain or vice captain of the local minor team or senior team. He'd say, sorry, he said, you're not for here. He says, you'll be looking for days off for training. You'll be looking for days off for games. He said, don't want to know about anyone that's coming here that's interested in GAA. So,
no way.
so my own mindset was like, what's the fucking point in chasing a ball of wind around the field? And interestingly, then I was sent to Flannan's and Ennis to school, which is like, the sporting hub of County Clare, really. Like, it was Harty Cups and GA football. It was all GA. And like, I was tipping away playing a bit of football with the club. Either I'm untalented or either I had zero interest. I like to put it down to the second, that, because I never had that culture of football or following sport or anything that I had no interest. Maybe I was untalented. There's a good chance of that. But
yeah, that in common with you as well, man. I've
really?
I was useless at field sport. Useless. You know what I mean? Like, I was on the local rugby team, and there was only 16 lads, and I was the lad on the bench. Do you know what I mean? What was the first mountain you climbed?
First mountain I climbed was 28 years of age, Carntool. After deciding to head off on this big journey to climb Mount Everest, I decided I better try and climb a mountain, and I started training and preparing for Carntool. Straight off the back of.
So hang on now a second, right? So you were basically, first thing you did was I want to climb Everest, and then you did Carntool.
Yeah,
amazing, man. Tell us about how that decision came about.
It was Celtic Tiger. Business was going really good, and every business was going really good in the Celtic Tiger, this artificial bubble that we're all working in, and hotels were, as just like the construction, completely caught up in this bubble. So I was able to borrow loads of money as a young lad and invested in the business and build rooms and extend and build a second hotel and all this crazy stuff. Look, all the hotels survived and got out the other side is the good side, but at the time it was a bit like development was just at an exponential rate that wasn't real. In the middle, I suppose, was around 2007, when this idea of Everest came to me, and I remember reading an article in the paper about the climbers on Everest at that stage, and something resonated with me. And I often have reflected, like in hindsight, why was it that Everest resonated with me, considering I had no sporting background. And I think my mindset was in a place that something needed to change in my life. I was completely unhealthy. I had no work-life balance whatsoever. It was that 80, 100-hour weeks, no days off, just love work, been there all the time. But I was completely unhealthy, completely overweight, smoking, drinking, no idea about nutrition, any type of wellness in my life. And my dad passed away 2 months prior to reading this. He was only 62 years of age. And, his lifestyle was the exact same as my lifestyle, like bottles of Lucozade left, right and center, and boxes of biscuits and everything else. And just like me, he'd no exercise, no walks, not even as much as a walk on the beach, nothing. And I think my mindset was primed that, I was starting to realize that, Jesus, still young, but I did want to live a full life. And I looked at him and, it was cancer, but cancers can be so much related to lifestyle and all that.
Totally, yeah.
So I suppose I was probably starting to think along those lines, something needed to change. And when I read that article, something about it resonated with me. I knew team sports didn't suit me. I've mentioned that. And something about the hardship, I think, of mountaineering, when I read about it, I love the idea of it. Like when I was growing up, I had two ultimate professions, and one was hotel management and the other was the army. I was obsessed with military. Like I was subscribing to the military publication from the age of 14 and reading it, and obsessed with everything to do with military. And I was always fascinated by special forces as a result of that. And I think, because I'd never participated much in sports, I always wondered, was there any metal underneath the skin? And did I take the soft option? I'd never, the hotels couldn't be further away from special forces. Great food, drink, comfort, never out in the cold or misery. And for so many different reasons, I suppose, something about that, the idea of Everest and the idea of that article resonated with me. And I said, Jesus, you know what? Wouldn't that be something amazing to aim for? Not having a notion about what was involved, of course, but knowing, of course, that I did have to climb a mountain. So that's where the first trip to Carrauntoohil came from.
Amazing, man. So talk to me about your journey, like the list of mountains you went through and your journey up to Everest then.
Yeah, so from the first unsuccessful attempt on Carrauntoohil, which only got halfway up past
No
the Devil's Ladder, I managed to get many more summits under the belt. But I remember that first trip, I booked a guide called Niall Foley he worked out of Killarney, and I booked Niall Foley, and I remember he had worked on Everest expeditions before that. I loved the idea of it. I was picking his brain all the way up along. He said afterwards, he just knew that I had Everest on the brain, but I only got halfway up past the Devil's Ladder, and he turned me around and said, "You're not going out for today." So from that, I had many more successful climbs. I think I've probably Carrauntoohil climbed about 250 times at this stage. It was kind of my go-to place, and McGillicuddy Reeks was my go-to place. And I absolutely, if there's any, it's my favorite mountain in the world is Carrauntoohil, bar none. Just because it resonates so much with me. And before every trip and for every adventure, it was my training ground down there. I managed to nail it 8 times in one day at one stage, which was a great feat, summiting 8 times in one day.
Amazing, yeah.
So I suppose I did venture further afield. I was starting to pick up, with a bit of experience in Ireland, I started to pick up some experience in Scotland, booking trips there through Adventure Peaks and Jagged Globe, doing the winter skills training out there every January or February. And with that, then I started to venture to the Alps, I suppose, after a couple of winter skills. Now, I did visit Scotland once, if not twice, some years for every year leading into from when I started climbing, really. And from there, I suppose the Alps was a great place that I loved. And my first big mountain there was Mont Blanc after Kilimanjaro, which I climbed before that. Then I went to Mont Blanc, and the Alps became my go-to place, I suppose, for those September trip. I'd always have the February trip to Scotland. I'd always have the September trip after the summer season working to the Alps, many trips out there. So Mont Blanc, Grand Paradiso, the Matterhorn, Dent de Géant, Mont Blanc de Tacoul, and lots of different technical ridges out there, like the Cosmic Surette, maybe 5 or 6 times at this stage, and loads of the technical routes around there. I went out to the Eiger a couple of times, but it was out of condition, not the North Face, unfortunately. But prep to do for that. And getting lots of experience in the Alps. Then I got out to Nepal to base camp, and more alpine trips after that. And then eventually Armada was the big one in the Himalayas that I got to summit, which was amazing at 6,800 meters.
I'm hoping to get out there myself actually in November. How was that one for you, Armada?
Amazing. Loved it. A beautiful mountain. And I heard in your podcast when you described it as a beautiful mountain before, but my wife always found it a bit weird when I described the mountain as beautiful in such affectionate terms. Yeah,
I can get that too. Yeah, for sure.
There's beautiful things in life, and a mountain is one of them, she says. Your wife is beautiful, for example, but not a mountain, she'd remind me. But anyway, amazing. And getting to work with the Sherpas again, expedition style, beautiful camps, like, that Camp 2 up on that rocky tower, spectacular. Summit night, big, long summit night, lovely steep, adds nice little bit of technical work in it, lovely exposure all the way along, amazing views, like, from the summit, from up past Camp 2, you're seeing all the way on the summit, pretty much, you're seeing all the way down to base camp, and, just that huge exposure is unbelievable. Of course, that Deblam, that big glacier, a bit daunting when you're kind of moving in underneath that.
Yeah.
Amazing experience, but for me, it was a huge learning ground. It was about a year and a half before Everest for me, and it exposed huge weaknesses in my mental abilities for Everest. So I had to get physically stronger. I knew that from it. I performed fine on it. I summited it, and it was grand. So, I knew I was going up a different notch here to Everest, but mentally it exposed huge weaknesses. So it was, that famous quote: "It's not the mountains we conquer, but ourselves." And certainly Armada was where I learned so much that I needed to conquer. I was climbing it with an amazing adventurer called Gavin Hennigan, who I'm sure you're from Galway. I've never met anybody with a mindset as strong as Gavin. Like, he's absolutely undefeatable in his own mind. He's so strong-willed and so full of self-belief. And I was sharing a tent with Gavin and climbing with him, and Gavin started to suffer from altitude sickness, which, as you know, can just hit anyone at any time, irrelevant of fitness and anything like that. Perhaps even if I won't say that, because I won't say perhaps even if you're more fit, you're more prone to, because it'll stop. People use it as an excuse not to train for your expeditions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So Gavin was super fit, but he got very sick. And I remember on the mountain, he said to me that it was hitting him hard psychologically, because he said on any expedition, within a few days or a week, he'll find a reason why he's more likely the strongest person in the group and why he's the one most likely to achieve. And it was like this huge penny drop moment for me when I realized that within like a week or so, I would find a reason why everybody else on the expedition was more likely to succeed than me, why I was absolutely more certain that I was going to fail. And I had a huge belief in Armada for most of the time that I was going to die. A million miles away from the mindset you need for climbing mountains or doing any expeditions like any of your climbers need. And certainly, while Armada was a nice expedition and a nice length of time, Everest was double that, if not more, and a lot more time on your own and a lot more time at base camp. And if my mindset was out of kilter like it was in Armada I was going to be in huge trouble forever. So Armada was amazing for so many reasons, but I do think it was the one where I really discovered that kind of huge gap in my preparation, and that was something I had to really throw myself into.
Yeah, do you think you, like on reflection, however many years on, do you think you enjoyed Armada or was it tough for you because of your mentality, or how was it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose I wasn't enjoying it. I suppose the more I was certain I was going to fail, the more I took great pride from it at the end.
Yeah.
But I wasn't in the moment like I should have been. I wasn't fully immersed and present in the amazing views and all that, and the amazing location. Much and all as I could see it and admire it and appreciate it now in photos, I certainly could have taken a lot more out of it than I did on Everest and beyond that.
Yeah. But I mean, those are the trips, like, I mean, especially in my experience from a failed summit attempt, you learn so much, I think that was nice of you that you did summit, but you found the trip so tough. Like, you learn a whole lot about yourself and you really get stronger. Like, it's very hard to learn anything from a success, so that probably had a big impact on you.
Yes, so true. Jesus, like yeah, the biggest learnings are when things are, it's when you find yourself most exposed. And like, like mountains are a momentary experience of a few weeks or a week or day, but it can be amazing what you can take with that for the rest of your life. And that's where the real value is, I suppose, in all of your clients, just like, Kilimanjaro, Mont Blanc, and every other, the earlier mountains for me. You can take something with you that can last long beyond that, that period of time standing on a summit. Yeah.
Cool.
You spoke in another podcast about how, it reflects on that, that we don't conquer mountains, and you said it's just by the will of nature and Mother Nature that you get to stand momentarily on top of, these great mountains that, you could be wiped out on anyone, at a blink of an eyelid. We're nothing in comparison to them.
Absolutely. It's always a very humbling experience, I find, So, come here. I want to start asking you about Everest now, which is a fascinating topic for me and a lot of the listeners. One of the most dangerous parts of the whole climb is the Khumbu Icefall, which is just outside base camp, where a lot of people will have been on the Everest base camp trek. How was that experience for you? How did you find the Icefall?
The Icefall is a very surreal place. Like, it's very eerie. It's it just feels like it's a different landscape to anything I'd ever been on before. Different to base camp, different to the rest of the mountain further up. I was tricking my mind, I suppose, to enjoy all this stuff, but I actually enjoyed all of the mountain. But you have to be in a very solid place in your mind for the Icefall. Entering it in the dark, of course, when you start moving on the way up the mountains, usually in the dark of night, crossing those ladders, the huge falls at either side. Looking, when you're on the way back down, you can see the crevasses just going down to black. The whole thing is very unstable. Of course, the towers of ice, like the size of a 3-story house or higher. And you're kind of scooting your way in around these, snaking your way around these huge blocks of ice that you feel could tumble at any point in time. And then, of course, you've the surface you're on, and then you've got the avalanche risk left and right of you on the mountains left and right of you, which was the big killer in 2014 and 15. Whatever's under your feet, you've got it left and right of you, so you're kind of surrounded by that craziness of it all. The ladders were a challenge, but I felt stable. I prepared up my backyard for the ladders. The only risk of the dogs at either side looking up at me, that I'd land on a dog.
So you set ladders up, basically. You mustn't have been far off the ground at all, were you?
Exactly, just a few feet off the ground. The only risk was I might kick the dog with a crampon.
And you put the crampons and the boots on, and you just had a practice going over and back. Yeah, that's great, man.
Went over and back loads of times, and set up, transition points and connecting up ropes and the guide ropes, and did it out in Scotland before I went out as well. With Adele Pennington, did a bit of preparation and did a lot around the mindset, to really, to be really present, that my mind couldn't wander below the ladder, that, everything beneath the metal of the ladder, where my boot was connecting with that ladder, everything beneath that became absolutely invisible and irrelevant to me. Couldn't let my mind linger beyond the process of stepping on that ladder. So the sensation of applying the pressure onto the front of my foot, feeling the knee bend, glide across, the sound of the metal as it hit the ladder, the sensation of any wind or anything that was moving, the feeling of the rope, just filling my mind with these sensations so that I was absolutely present in what I was doing, not getting distracted, so that I would do it right, but more so that my mind wouldn't wander beneath the ladder. Like a friend of mine fell off the ladder there in front of us at one point, Alan. And it happens, and there's you are roped up left and right, but a lot of these ropes are just ice screws in. So when the sun hits them, everyone goes past. They maybe put a rock or put a bit of ice, snow on top, but often you'll get to the end, and sometimes the rope will just pop out of your hand. When you get to the end, so like you are roped in, but there is a chance that rope won't hold as well. So you don't want to fall. But a friend of mine fell in, so it can happen too. But look, it was a short section. It was only about an 8-foot crossing, and the Sherpas pulled him out. We all give a hand to pull him out of it, but we got there.
It's good work, like at that altitude, like pulling someone out of a crevasse.
True. On the summit push, I had a very surreal experience on the Icefall. I'm not a very religious person, but yet though I walked through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. I started to ring in my mind. And I just remember, like a mantra, I just saying it over and over and over again. And even to one of the guys in front of me said, "What the fuck saying? Like, he said, would you ever shut up? But I was mostly in my mind, but every once in a while, I think I was obviously saying it out loud. And it's just, sometimes a quiet night. I remember that final on the way up through the darkness. The eeriness, was a clear night, absolutely calm, stars up ahead. And the moon was reflecting these towers of ice so that they looked even more prominent, and everything else was just, so look, amazing, but you don't underestimate the risks of it, I suppose, either. And the idea is, I suppose, is to move as quickly as you can, as safely as you can. And there is times when they'll tell you, go as fast as you can before the point of running. There's 50 meters here. It's a bit like a Mont Blanc, the Grand Couloir, where you just have to move as fast as you can without running. And there is points on the Icefall, at 6,000 meters, where you're moving as fast as you can, absolutely gasping out of breath, but without running, just get out of it.
You're barely moving at all, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So, come here. I read somewhere that you said it was a 10-year journey to the summit of Everest for 25 minutes on the top. Was it worth it? And tell the listeners about your summit day as well, man.
Yeah, it was 10 years. So at 28, I started. 38, at 38, I summited. A long journey. I took a sabbatical in the middle for about a year and a half or 2 years. It was a crazy time at work, and I suppose it's an important part of my story. I'll wedge it in here.
Take your time.
But there was after that Celtic Tiger, that bad recession came, and hospitality got completely hammered with it. And I had a tragedy in our family. I lost my brother-in-law to suicide. So,
fuck, man, I'm sorry.
Between work and between family life, Everest just didn't seem like the right thing to do anymore. There's there's no doubt about it. Everest and these mountains, there's an element of selfishness to them. While you're away, people are worried and all that type of stuff. So, so I just figured it wasn't the right thing to do for my family. And then with work, there was huge pressure on work. And I felt like what I needed to do was just work every hour that I could find in the day. And I threw myself into work. But of course, this time work was different to Celtic Tiger. It was all the bad stuff, the challenges and setbacks, and, money tight and cash tight, and, business dropping and all that type of stuff that happened with that recession. And there was huge pressure and huge stress with work. Nothing like I'd gone through in my life before. The one thing that I needed in my life was exercise in the great outdoors and mountains. And no one should need Everest or whatever their big challenges is to motivate them to go out for a 5 or 10K run or whatever it might be, or to go up Carntool. But for me, because there was so much pressure and there was so much other, I suppose, pulls of emotions and time, that for me, Everest was the ultimate goal that would force me to train away on a weekly basis. And there's always that question of, like, how could you rationalize that you could do this and stuff like that. For me, there was far greater risks by not having the dream of Everest and the aspirations to climb it. Even if I never got there, it was getting me out to Carntool and getting me on trips. So it was a hugely important facet of my life that brought that well-being that I needed more than ever in my life during. So thankfully I got back and I got back on track with climbing and found my way back to the mountains again. So 10 years, 28 to 38. And it was 25 minutes on the summit, but as I said, there's a lot more significant moments on the mountains than maybe than just that moment on Everest. There's many, many moments that are equally significant.
Yeah, God, that's amazing, man. Jesus. It's interesting, climbing mountains and what comes to us and what it motivates us all. But yeah, I can totally relate to what you're saying. It's a real kind of headmaster in that, it's something, especially big mountains, it is selfish, we can dress it up any way we want. But again, as you're saying there, for your own mental health, it was just so important for you to do it, I think,
Yeah, exactly. That's right. There's risks in everything in life. And, I think our own personal health, our own personal mental health, there's no greater risk than not being cognizant and making efforts to look after that. And, I shouldn't have needed. It's the only thing that I ever had that real positive fitness and well-being experience was because of that journey. So that's what worked for me, I guess.
Yeah, I guess, sure, if you do what's good for your own mental health, it affects the people in your family, in your life, in your business and everything. So yeah, it's kind of totally essential. I can really relate to that. John, hang on there 1 second. I'm just going to bring Ariana on the show for a minute. Ariana, are you there?
Hi, James. How are things?
I'm good, thanks. So what are we talking about today?
Well, I just want to talk about our goals for the future and what's next for Earth's Edge. Although we are so thrilled with the results from our B-Corp assessment, we want to continue to create more positive social and environmental changes. The B-Corp status isn't just about what we've done, it's about what we can do in the future. Some of our goals include becoming 100% carbon neutral, becoming a more transparent business, partnering with other B Corps to increase awareness around businesses' responsibility to the community and the environment, as well as growing and increasing our social development projects.
The assessment has really helped us create a long-term strategy for the business, hasn't it?
It absolutely has, and like anything else, you have to keep on improving, and we have big plans for the future.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much for coming on again.
Thanks, James. Chat to you next week.
Tell us about the summit, man. Tell us about that day. I'm really fascinated to hear about that.
The summit push comes down to six days is what it generally is, there or thereabouts. And after all the acclimatization up and down, as you know well, your body is getting stronger and waiting for that weather window. And the weather was very slow to clear. The winds, these high jet stream winds on the summit, were very slow to clear it. We had Wi-Fi base camp. I was looking at all the blogs and stuff. There was reports that maybe the winds mightn't clear. By the time the winds eventually cleared on the summit, 20 or 30% of people had left base camp and abandoned their expeditions. It was starting to shove on a bit. Interestingly, then it just came out of nowhere, with no notice, the forecast came that it was going to clear up. And I remember when we got told about that summer push, I was at base camp for 5 days doing absolutely nothing, 6 days, nothing, just eating. And I started to feel real lethargic and sluggish. And myself and a few said we'd go and climb Kilimanjaro. So we left base camp and went back. And I remember just saying, you know what, I'm going to burn the hell out of everything. Now I'm going to push as hard as I can on this. And there was a few people ahead of me. I said, no, I'm going to pass them no matter what. Now they turned out to be very fit. So I put myself under huge pressure. And I burned it. I got to the summit of Kilimanjaro and then I tore back to base camp. I remember on the summit, my legs were vibrating I pushed so hard. I was so lethargic. I just felt like I needed to get a big burn on. I got back to base camp around 4 p.m. And Pasang, our Sherpa, said a meeting. We were waiting for you to come back. He said a meeting at 5 p.m. So a meeting was called at 5 p.m. Everyone together. We're starting our summit push tonight, he said.
Whoa. Okay.
It'd be like going out running a 10K before a county final. You couldn't do anything.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. Yeah, Jesus.
So anyway, summit push 5 p.m. Meeting, summit push midnight. Word came in. There was rope fixing was the challenge that year. Wrong ropes, everything had been brought to it. So word came in that the Gurkha team, which Nims was part of, this famous mountaineer that wasn't very prominent at that stage, Nims was part of the Gurkha team, and word came back through Sherpas. It's all cloak and dagger stuff around base camp, whispers and rumors, and everyone trying to get out before any other expedition, get the first summits and get down before anyone else moves. And word came out that these lads were going to summit, fix the ropes. So we got the short notice, and it was so secretive that we weren't allowed talk going through base camp. Head torches off. Don't tell anybody. Don't even tell home that you're summiting. Don't put it up on social media or anywhere that you're going for your summit attempt. Just maybe give a message at home, but to tell them not to tell anybody. So the summit attempt kind of came out of nowhere, and midnight onto Camp 1. Didn't rest at Camp 1. I just had a bit of food and straight on to Camp 2. So first day was base camp all the way to Camp 2, a long, hard day.
What elevation are you there?
Camp 3 is 7.2, I think. So we're probably Camp 2 is about 6.2 or 6.3. Because actually Camp 1 and Camp 2, there's no big difference in elevation, only maybe I'd say 200 meters or 100 meters. It's very flat. There's a long kind of flat drawn out walk from Camp 1 to Camp 2.
Okay.
One of the things that I took to mountaineering for was because I felt like I had a natural ability to acclimatize, from the very early days in Kilimanjaro and stuff. Things tended to come right for me, and for some reason on Everest I wasn't acclimatizing as good. And this guy Alan, who I mentioned, I trained with him in Scotland about 2 months before I went out, and I'd so much work put in. I was flying it out in Scotland. But when I don't want to say I was flying out past him in Scotland, but you know where I'm coming from. But when I got to Everest, he was pulling out ahead of me, every day. I remember I got to Camp 2 and I was 7 in our expedition. It was probably the second or third last day, and second last maybe. And I started to eat food at Camp 2, and this was my big setback moment on the summit push. started to eat food at Camp 2. I started to vomit. I started to eat food again and started to vomit. And turns out I was going to be unable to hold on any food for the entire 6-day summit push.
Wow.
The most I was able to take on subsequent days was sugary water and maybe a couple of squares of chocolate in the evening. So, when you're burning all these calories, 15 or 20,000 calories a day, and, the plan was maybe 2 liters of water and maybe 3 to 5,000 calories worth of food. And all of a sudden then you can barely hold down water. And it wasn't food poisoning. It was nearly a sunstroke, or, stomach just gave up. Like, the rest of me was fine, but the stomach just fucking wouldn't hold down food. I didn't realize how it was going to last so long at Camp 2, but I remember in Camp 2 saying, this isn't good. I was already struggling and the fucking stomach was giving up on me.
I can imagine your confidence is fairly low, all right, yeah.
It was a bit of a frightener, all right. But I had every tool that I needed in the psychological toolbox to kind of get me through it. So, I had everything, like that I was going to turn all the negatives into positives and fill my mind with positive thoughts and conversations and all that type of stuff. So, I had all that stuff. And I remember one of the techniques I said was the following morning, I said I tried to stay out in front and get that boost of confidence from being out in front from the team. So I was up first and packed and sunscreen and gear on and everything ready. And I set off straight after the lead Sherpa. And I remember within about 200 or 300 meters, I was fucking empty. Like, I was exhausted. I was on the ground, like just gassed out, like couldn't maintain that pace. And eventually, of course, I found myself that everyone had passed me. And within the first 20 minutes of the day, I was now at the very back. And I suppose there's one standout moment, and that was that moment for me when the last Sherpa said to me, one step at a time. And that was when I started to break it down into these mini goals and started to look at micro goals and breaking the mountain down. Because when I started on this summit push, you really are starting to thinking about, I'm going there, I'm going to end up there in a few days. And you start fixating on the summit. And I was like 2,000 meters below the summit, and it was over my left shoulder, like way up there. And I had to just break that down and break it down into 50 or 100 meters and start pushing forward. And it very much became, one foot in front of the other, one step at a time. Now, it wasn't that I was completely goosed. It was just that I had to find my pace, and I just had to psychologically not give up and not get disheartened or demoralized by my pace. Sure enough, from Camp 2, I got to Camp 3 to Camp 4. I was at the back, second last, first last, third last, something like that, every day. Never in the top 5. Eventually Camp 4, of course, we're touching on the death zone then, 7,800 meters, 7,900 meters. And that summit night was just unbelievable. I felt absolutely present. I felt absolutely, unbelievably grateful for having the ability to keep moving. And I remember I set off late from, like, Jesus, talk about getting it wrong on the most important night of my life. Remember the Sherpa said, summit attempt 9 p.m., 9 p.m. And I thought that meant, start waking up at 9, like, you weren't going to sleep. You only arrived in at 4 p.m. or something. You were just going to rest and put on music. And so I thought that meant, like, start getting yourself organized at 9 p.m. She would be setting off around 10. Like, there was this thing about Sherpa time. There was never an accurate time. Like, but on the button of 9, I was inside the sleeping bag. Alan and the tent beside me inside the sleeping bag. We couldn't hear everyone getting ready beside us. And it's 45 minutes to get ready, to get all the gear on at least.
Yeah.
I remember the tent up, and they were like, "Where are you? Where are you? Come on."
Lying off in bed.
Fucking, lying in on the fucking summit night. So Alan got out just before me, or I got out just before Alan, actually. So I was the second last from our expedition to leave on the summit attempt. But it just clicked for me on the summit night. The acclimatization just peaked for me, and my head was in a good place, and my body was in a good place. And I actually moved really well on that summit night. So all that shite down below didn't happen up higher. Now, I still wasn't eating and all that stuff, but I was moving really well, and I was really present. And people can get very delirious and and not remember the night, and feel like they're pushing too far. The strongest man in our group, Adriano, without a doubt, the strongest every day, first in at every camp, so strong. he had one-to-one Sherpa support every day, even on the trek to base camp, because he was in hours ahead of us. And on the summit night, acclimatization hit him hardest, so much so that he was saying his act of contrition, he was saying his prayers because he didn't feel like he was going to survive the summit night. So, that crazy stuff that can happen with acclimatization and altitude, some people take that big bang that it hits them really hard. And for me, it just clicked and I moved really well. I was second to the summit and I was the first back to Camp 4 from our expedition at the least amount of time, I suppose, in the death zone. And just felt, I always wondered when I got to the summit, everyone would say, push harder than you've ever pushed before, don't hold back and don't give up and all that stuff. And you take all that in, but then the next person will say, make sure you've enough in the tank to get back down. When you get to the summit, you're only halfway there. Don't empty the tank, have enough in the tank to get back down. So the big unknown in my head all the time was, will I get to the summit and will I feel like I haven't enough to get back down? That was that kind of underlying subconscious fear. And I do remember being on the summit and having that realization that I've plenty in the tank, I'm safe, I'm relatively safe, but I'm safe in that I feel like I've enough to get back down. I'm very present. My mind is absolutely alert. And, I was very tuned in.
Amazing. Yeah. It just kind of goes to show, like, we're always telling people on expedition, like, to just focus on the day at hand. Cause, I wouldn't say it's that common your experience to be really struggling and then go higher up a mountain and then start feeling better. It's amazing. It must have been such a satisfying feeling to be going up the biggest mountain in the world, going like, physically I've got this. It must have been really nice for you. Like, obviously you're going through a huge amount of pain, but that feeling, like, must have been incredible.
It was great. And I remember feeling like really jolly coming back down, like really jolly, when people were around you, as I said, like delirious, like lads, I saw like a full on huge, nearly fist fight between a client and a climber and a Sherpa, that the Sherpa, I was escalating, the Sherpa said, that was it, he was gone, and your man was just completely off his head. And I saw there's that extreme to feeling. It was so reassuring to feel present and feel like, absolutely everything I was doing, my ropes and abseiling, everything I was doing, I felt very present with it all. And like, could chat to people, could chat to the Sherpa, although I hadn't much English, but I felt like I was blathering on to him a lot. And,
she probably didn't understand you anyway. It's your Eau Claire accent, like.
Even doing a bum slide on a section on the way back down and all, doing these, like, 50-meter bum slide. I was like, here I am fucking bum sliding on Everest to descent, like, where it's nice and steep, but not too steep that it's going to get out of control. So, it felt like this is what I thought it was going to be. But, as I said, it can, that experience can be, it was physically really tough. Like, I don't mean to underestimate the risks and the challenges with it. But for me, it was just like, it just clicked at the right time. And while it was really tough, it just felt like it was working for me. Like, I fucking absolutely fell apart on the last few days again. Like, I remember coming back into base camp. I was the very last from the expedition again, back into base camp. Like, I couldn't take 5 steps and I'd have to stop again. Like, even coming through the icefall, like, I just couldn't. I was completely empty. Like, I had no energy left. So it was the highs and lows. That was exactly it.
Yeah.
Highs and lows. Excuse the pun.
Oh, amazing, man. Well, congratulations on the achievement. It's incredible. What I wanted to ask you, I know your wife, Avian, came with you to base camp. How many days in advance of you going on summit would she have left?
She spent one night at base camp, and then I walked out to climatize on Lebuje instead of Island Peak. And she left with one night at Lebuje. I was moving up the mountain, and she left. So, she was gone for 6 weeks, 5-6 weeks before I summited, something like that, so she was gone a long time, and that was a hard goodbye.
I was going to ask you, what was it like saying goodbye to her? What conversation did you guys have before her leaving, like?
She was very calm about the whole thing. Like, she loves the Sherpas, the Nepalese culture, all of that. Like, she'd been to base camp with me 5 years earlier, and like, she wasn't in the right headspace for it, didn't enjoy it as much, and then completely, loved it, and absolutely had huge trust in the process, had huge trust in the expedition team, Ascent Himalayas, and actually was the calm person, and I was getting a bit delirious, that day. So I get like overly emotional. I mean, my nephew was there, saying goodbye to him and saying goodbye to her. Like, I really, like, I was very emotional. I think because I had them all the way into base camp, didn't feel like I was on the Everest expedition. And then it was like that moment that they were saying goodbye, it was like, that was like the start of the expedition. So even though, I left home, 10 days or 2 weeks at that stage, it felt like it was only starting at that point, and it was a very tough place because you're in the mountain. I was facing into the 6,100 meter summit the next day, and it was really getting real very fast, and hugely emotional.
Yeah, I actually had a similar experience a few years ago, I think in 2016, on a 7,500 meter peak in China called Muztagh. My ex-wife, my wife at the time, was climbing with me, but she decided to turn around and go home. And like, I've left, I've gone away on an expedition and said goodbye to people, but like the experience of watching her leaving camp, and like I could still see her walking away 2 hours later.
Jeez.
And it's just such a long walk out, and you could see the whole thing, and it's a totally different experience. Because party is like, oh, I want to go home too, but obviously you're like, you've made a mental commitment to yourself to keep going on the mountain, but it's a total head messer, isn't it? Like, it's a completely different experience.
And no one has ever asked me that. I actually have never really thought about that or anything, but you're right. Like I couldn't describe how emotional I was. Like I was literally in floods of tears from the morning. Yeah, like I'm very close to my nephew and all that. And then starts becoming like the whole thing just gets so real. And it's not like, it's not just the fear of, like, there is, the subconscious always has fears of, on any mountain, there's risks, and it was just everything. And I think, as you said, maybe it's because you're in that alien environment. It's very different from saying so goodbye to someone at home. It was amazing though to have her there, because the more of an understanding she had of everything out there, the better it was for her, because it wasn't as alien to her when she was reading stuff, or understanding it, or reading about the icefall, reading blogs, or getting updates. The more she understood it, the definitely made a huge difference to keep her calm when I was out there.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess meeting your Sherpa team, who by the sounds of things were really, really solid, that really put her mind at ease. Amazing, man. That's so interesting. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is, I got the opportunity to ask you to come on the podcast because you were in touch with me last week about becoming a B-Corp. Obviously, Earth's Edge, you became a B-Corp a little earlier this year. So you're planning on making the Armada Hotel a B-Corp. What's driving you to do that?
Yeah, look, I think B-Corp is amazing. And I think, what it stands for, as much for me and for the team, it's to get ourselves, it's not a marketing thing, first and foremost. Although no doubt we will use it for marketing, but it's not what's driving it. It's about, I started out the conversation saying that, my dad set up a pub here 54 years ago. And, I'd like to see myself plowing on and working away here for 20 or 30 years more. And, profit is never going to be that driver to keep you passionate about something. They have to believe in it. It has to be more than just the salary to them, or the bottom line, or whatever it might be. It has to matter that we're doing something positive, and the business is solid and amazing customer base. And I would like to be able to do something meaningful with that. That means that the business can make a difference, to the environment, to the community, and all the other facets that's involved with it. When it comes to business, it would be the Everest in my business agenda. Something that's out there that I would love to achieve and love to stand over. And because you have to stand for something, I suppose, and we'd like to stand for the right things and make a difference. And you know what, someone might listen to this and say there's lots of things we don't stand for. I certainly know we're doing a lot right, but we have a lot more that we need to do right. But it's, I suppose, about going off on that journey, about putting it out there and getting there and making a difference.
Total respect, man, because it is a journey. There's we've reached that point, but we've a lot more to do, and like we've got big plans to just keep thriving in that area. But yeah, as I said to you last week, if I could be of any help, like pick up the phone at any point. And before I let you go, if you had any advice for someone listening who's got an eye on Everest, like what would you say to them? Like,
I'd certainly encourage anyone to put an eye on Everest. I think the most important thing is to enjoy the journey. I've had people that I've worked with since Everest that have pursued the Everest objective, but maybe haven't enjoyed the journey, that they're too focused on the end goal, on that end mountain. And it was advice I got just before Everest was, the summit might never happen for many reasons. And Everest might never happen. And the summit, even if you get to Everest, might never happen. You can't set off on a journey purely for that moment on the summit. And I started to realize that, like, the importance of every expedition, and to be very present in every expedition, every climb. You can never underestimate any mountain, and it's absolutely amazing to have that ultimate objective out there. But every mountain in between should matter and should be significant every day. On from the very first days, from Scotland to Kili to any other mountain people do, everyone is as significant. I before we went recording, I said I found Kili really tough at the time, when I did.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like every mountain is a challenge, and every mountain presents its own challenge. So apply yourself to them, enjoy them, be really present, and as you move up the rungs of the ladder, keep pushing on with that journey, but never make any mountain seem insignificant on the scale of Everest, because there's just as challenging days that you can have on many other mountains.
Oh, sure, I know too well, man. I've got lost in the Schlie Blooms, which are barely even mountains, So yeah, that's great advice.
Down through the header I was listening to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was chatting to my dad about it. But John, that was absolutely brilliant, man. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I think people are really going to love it. And we'll keep in touch anyway about B-Corp.
Great. And look, congratulations to you. And do you know what? I have to acknowledge Brian Bateson as well, who's one of your amazing guides. I was listening on a podcast. John Healy was mentioned as a guide too. I did a little bit of rock climbing with John Healy, but I've done a lot with Brian. And, you get the best people, fair play to you. And I met so many of your teams during my times on the Everest region, and your company, your guides, and the professional support you provide is unbelievable. And Brian was a huge part of my preparation for Everest. I did so many days rock climbing, so many days training with him, and we've great talent and fair play in Ireland, and fair play to you. You tend to attract the best of it. So well done. I think you have a great company, and if hotel keeping doesn't work out for me, it might take me on someday.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Oh, that's great stuff. Thank you so much for that compliment. I really appreciate it. And sure, hopefully Brian is listening now. He's probably sick of listening to me in the podcast. He tuned out ages ago, but
thanks so much.
Thank you, man.
Talk to you soon.
This podcast was produced by Earth's Edge. We're a small business based in Ireland who organise big adventures all over the world. For more information about us and the trips discussed on this podcast, visit earths-edge.com or follow us on Instagram. Don't forget to sign up to our mailing list to be in the running to win one of our summit jackets. There's a link in the show notes. And while you're there, if you could subscribe and review the podcast, that'd be brilliant. I'm your host, James McManus. Thanks for listening and have a super week.